My hand trembled as I counted the bills for the third time. 20, 40, 60. The worn faces of presidents blurred together, but the result remained infuriatingly unchanged. $1,000. An entire month of my pension vanished from my wallet. I sat on the edge of my bed in the quiet morning light of my Pittsburgh home, staring at the worn leather billfold that had belonged to my father. For 68 years, I'd reached for it from the same spot on my nightstand, a ritual as constant as the sunrise over the Brookline row houses. But this morning felt different, wrong. Maybe I spent it somewhere, I whispered to the empty room, but the words felt hollow, a flimsy defense against a rising tide of dread. Where would an old steel worker spend $1,000? The Giant Eagle for groceries? My weekly coffee at DeLuca's Diner in the Strip District? I searched frantically under the bed, through my dresser drawers, in every jacket pocket hanging silently in the closet. Nothing. The sick feeling in my stomach grew stronger with each empty pocket I found, a cold knot of certainty tightening in my gut. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted upstairs from the kitchen. Clara was humming, some pop tune from the radio she liked. Normal sounds from what should have been a normal morning, but everything had shifted now, like a picture frame knocked slightly askew. I walked downstairs slowly, my legs feeling heavier than their years. Clara stood at the stove, flour dusting her blue apron, her hair pulled back in the same ponytail she'd worn since high school. She was a good girl, my Clara. Seeing her here, in the kitchen my Eleanor had once commanded, was the only thing that had eased the crushing loneliness of the past 3 years. "Morning, Dad," she smiled over her shoulder. "Coffee's ready." "Clara, honey, you haven't seen my money, have you? I seem to have misplaced $1,000. Her face, a younger, softer version of her mother's, immediately showed concern. "Money? Dad, I haven't taken anything from your room. Are you sure you didn't spend it somewhere? Maybe you forgot." The question stung more than it should have. Was I becoming one of those old men, the kind who misplaced memories and cast accusations because their own minds were failing them? "What are you two whispering about?" Rick, my son-in-law, appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes from yesterday's delivery route. His dark eyes, always sharp and assessing, moved between Clara and me. "Money problems again?" I kept my voice steady, casual, the way you would when testing a potentially faulty piece of machinery. "Rick, you haven't been in my room, have you?" His posture changed instantly. His arms crossed, shoulders squared, a wall of defense slamming into place. "What are you implying, Arthur? That I'm some kind of thief?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm just asking. I work 16-hour days driving a truck to keep this family afloat." His voice rose sharply. "I don't need to steal from anyone, especially not family." Clara stepped between us, her hands fluttering nervously. "Dad, Rick would never. There has to be an explanation." But I watched Rick's face as he spoke, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. The defensive anger that seemed too quick, too practiced. Something cold settled in my chest, heavy as pig iron. "Of course," I said quietly, retreating. "I'm sure it will turn up." That evening, the charade of a happy family continued. I pretended to read the sports section, but my eyes kept drifting to Rick. He couldn't sit still, pacing near the window, checking his phone, a bundle of nervous energy. "Honey," he said suddenly, turning to Clara with a smile that seemed too bright, "I have a surprise for you. Close your eyes." Clara's face lit up with genuine delight. I lowered my newspaper, watching as Rick produced a small velvet jewelry box from his pocket, the kind from expensive stores downtown. When she opened it, Clara gasped. A delicate but substantial gold chain caught the living room light. "Oh, Rick, it's beautiful. Where did you get the money for this?" "I picked up extra shifts at the warehouse," he said, his chest puffing with pride. "Worked all weekend loading trucks, double overtime." I folded my paper carefully. "They pay pretty well for weekend work these days." Rick's smile tightened. "Time and a half on Saturday, double time on Sunday. It's worth it to see my wife smile." As he helped Clara fasten the chain, I saw the receipt crinkle in his back pocket. The logo was unmistakable. Silverman's Fine Jewelry on Fifth Avenue. $800, minimum for a chain like that. Funny how the numbers worked out. $1,000 missing, $800 spent on jewelry. The math was starting to make a very uncomfortable kind of sense. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay awake, listening to the old house settle around me, the sounds of my daughter and her husband breathing softly in the room next door. But my mind wasn't quiet. It was running calculations, analyzing data points with the cold precision of my former life at U.S. Steel. A problem had been presented, and the engineer in me refused to rest until it was solved. The variables were clear. Variable A, $1,000, missing. Variable B, an $800 gold necklace. Variable C, a lie about overtime shifts at a warehouse I knew for a fact. Only hired union drivers, a status Rick had not achieved. The correlation was too strong to be a coincidence. He had looked me in the eye and lied, not just a small social lie, but a foundational one, constructed to conceal a significant financial transaction. He had used my money to purchase my daughter's affection, a twisted sort of transaction that left a bitter taste in my mouth. I had welcomed him into my home, the home Eleanor and I had built, and he was treating my generosity not as a safety net but as an open vault. The anger was there, a low hot burn in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a profound sadness. This wasn't just about money. It was a deep, corrosive disrespect. A few days later, while trimming the rose bushes Eleanor had planted by the front steps, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, making her way over from her porch. For 30 years, she had been the watchful eyes of our block, a source of local news and unwavering kindness. "Arthur," she said, her voice a familiar, friendly rasp, "those roses are looking beautiful this year. Eleanor would be so proud." She always had the magic touch. I agreed, pausing my work. Speaking of touches, she leaned in conspiratorially. "Your Rick is certainly a man of expensive tastes. I saw a delivery truck from Silverman's drop off a package for him the other day. I thought, how wonderful, he's spoiling our Clara." I kept my expression neutral, but my heart began to beat a little faster. "He's a generous man." "Yes, and a busy one," she continued, oblivious to the turmoil her words were causing. "Comes and goes at all hours. Just last night, I was woken up by his truck around 2 in the morning. Seemed in a dreadful hurry." The pieces clicked into place. Mrs. Gable's innocent observations were the external validation I needed. The jewelry, the late-night activities, it was all part of a larger, darker picture. My son-in-law was not just an opportunistic thief. He was living a life of deception. I thanked Mrs. Gable for the chat and went back inside, her words echoing in my mind. The time for passive observation was over. The confirmation I dreaded came 2 weeks later. I woke with the sun, the morning routine now imbued with a sense of grim purpose. I reached for my wallet. I had meticulously counted the contents the night before. $800. Now, as I fanned the bills, my count stopped at $300. Exactly $500. Gone. This time, there was no confusion, no self-doubt about a failing memory. There was only the cold, hard certainty of betrayal. He had done it again. He had crept into my room while I slept, his hands violating my small, private space, and had taken what was not his. The crack that had formed in our family foundation had just widened into a chasm. I stood up from the bed, the grief and confusion of the past weeks crystallizing into a single, unshakable resolve. The engineer was fully awake now. A system was failing, and it was my responsibility to diagnose the fault and implement a definitive solution. I picked up my phone and dialed information. "Tech World Electronics, 5th Avenue, please." The store was a beacon of modern technology downtown, a place I hadn't stepped into for years, but now it was the most important destination in my world. The young clerk's voice was helpful. "Tech World, how can I help you?" "Good morning," I said, my own voice firm, devoid of the quaver of uncertainty that had plagued me for weeks. "Do you carry small, hidden cameras?" Downstairs, Clara was getting ready for her shift at the supermarket. "Dad, where are you going so early?" she asked as I descended the stairs, already dressed in my good jacket. "Into town, honey. Need to pick up something from the electronics store." "Want Rick to drive you?" he mentioned going that way for work. The irony was a bitter pill. "No, thanks. I prefer to drive myself." I patted her shoulder, hating the necessary deception, but knowing it was the only path to a truth she couldn't deny or explain away. Tech World Electronics sat on Fifth Avenue like a temple to a future I barely recognized. I parked carefully, my engineering instincts cataloging the store's own security cameras mounted above the entrance. If I was going to catch a thief, I needed to think like one. A young clerk with thick glasses approached, an inquisitive look on his face. "Help you find something specific, sir?" "Home security cameras," I stated clearly. "Something discreet but reliable. I need clear image quality, especially in low-light conditions." He led me to a display wall filled with tiny marvels of espionage. "This model here," he said, pointing to a compact black device no bigger than my thumb, "is the Night Eye Pro Mini. Records up to 12 hours on a full charge, motion activated, and connects to your smartphone." I examined the specifications card, my old professional curiosity taking over. "What about image quality in darkness?" "Crystal clear facial recognition from 10 feet. The infrared sensors activate automatically when the ambient light drops." "And motion activation sensitivity?" "Completely adjustable through the app. It won't trigger from shadows, but it catches all significant human movement. Very popular with our customers lately." It was perfect. A silent digital witness. "I'll take it." The small box sat on my passenger seat during the drive home, a silent promise of clarity. Clara's car was gone from the driveway. Her shift ran until 6. Rick's truck was also missing. I had the house to myself. Perfect timing. Inside, I spread the camera's components across my kitchen table, like puzzle pieces. The instruction manual was straightforward. Mount, connect to Wi-Fi, download app, calibrate settings. In my bedroom, I studied the layout with an engineer's eye for angles and sight lines. The nightstand sat directly across from my dresser. On the dresser, among other family photos, was a large framed picture from Clara's wedding. Behind that photo would be the perfect hiding spot. Positioning the camera required precision. Too high, and it would miss the wallet. Too low, and the foot of the bed would block the view. I adjusted the angle 3 times, using a small level from my toolbox, before achieving optimal coverage. The smartphone app connected immediately. The screen of my phone displayed a clear, wide-angle black and white image of my bedroom, complete with a timestamp. I tested the night vision by closing the curtains. The infrared sensors activated flawlessly, revealing every detail in ghostly clarity. After calibrating the motion sensitivity, I did one final walkthrough, passing by the nightstand. My phone buzzed instantly with an alert. The unseen eye was now open, and it was watching. Now for the bait. That evening, before heading to bed, I performed the final step of my setup. I counted out exactly $300 from my remaining cash, arranging the crisp bills so they were clearly visible when the wallet lay open on the nightstand. It wasn't enough to seem careless, but it was a sufficient prize to tempt a man who believed he was stealing from a forgetful old fool. The water glass went in its usual spot, a habit from Eleanor's time. Now, it would serve as a silent witness. Everything was ready. 7 a.m. arrived with the precision of a factory whistle. My eyes opened immediately, but today felt different. Today, I wasn't checking my wallet with confusion or doubt. Today, I was collecting evidence. The billfold lay exactly where I'd positioned it, but a quick glance inside confirmed my hypothesis. The bills were gone. All $300 vanished. No surprise this time, just a grim satisfaction that my trap had worked. I reached for my smartphone with a hand that trembled slightly, not from age, but from a cold, sharp anticipation. The SecureView app showed one new notification. A motion triggered recording time-stamped at 2:47 ampere. M. Ecom. My finger hovered over the play button. Once I watched this, there would be no going back. No more benefit of the doubt. No more pretending this was a misunderstanding. Only the cold, documented truth. I pressed play. The infrared footage began with the silent, still image of my bedroom. Then, the door opened with the barest whisper of hinges. A figure moved with practiced stealth toward my nightstand. The camera's resolution was crystal clear. Rick's features, his unshaven jaw, and the tired lines around his eyes, showed in perfect, ghostly detail as he approached my bed. He moved like someone who had done this many times before. There was no hesitation, no fumbling in the dark. He went straight to the wallet, his fingers deftly removing the bills. He did a quick count to verify the amount before stuffing the cash into his pocket. The methodical efficiency of the act spoke of experience, of a routine. The theft was proven. A wave of profound sadness washed over me, a father witnessing the undeniable criminality of the man his daughter loved. But then, something happened that made my blood run cold. After pocketing my money, Rick didn't leave. He paused, his eyes flicking toward my sleeping form. Then, with a chilling deliberateness, he picked up my water glass. The glass I drank from every morning, the first thing to touch my lips each day. He lifted it, and with a slight smirk on his face, clearly visible in the infrared light, he deliberately spit into it. It was not an accident. It was not a careless gesture. It was a calculated, profound act of disrespect, an act of pure contempt. I replayed that single, sickening moment 3 more times, each viewing stoking a fire inside me I thought had long since burned out. How long had this been going on? How many mornings had I started my day by drinking his spit? The theft of money was a crime born of greed and weakness. But this was personal. This was the act of a man who didn't just steal from his benefactor, but actively despised him. My fingers shook as I saved the video file to both my phone and a secure cloud backup. The evidence was too valuable to lose. The engineer who had sought only data and facts was gone. In his place was a father, a husband who cherished his late wife's memory, a man whose home had been violated in the most intimate way imaginable. The game had changed. This was no longer just about catching a thief. This was about delivering a lesson in respect that Rick would carry with him for the rest of his miserable life. My mind, trained for decades to solve complex mechanical problems, was now faced with an emotional one that had no clear schematic. I needed advice, an objective viewpoint from someone outside the blast radius of this domestic explosion. I dialed the number of Frank Miller, a man with whom I'd shared 20 years of coffee breaks and engineering challenges at the steel mill. He answered on the second ring, his voice as reliable as ever. "Frank, sorry to call so early. I need your advice on something serious." "Art? What's wrong, buddy? You sound like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than a ghost, Frank. I just caught my son-in-law stealing from me on camera." A heavy silence stretched across the line. Finally, Frank's voice returned, stripped of its usual cheer. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Video evidence, clear as daylight. Shows his face, shows him taking my money." I paused, the next words tasting like poison. "And Frank, it shows him spitting in my drinking water." The oath that came through the receiver was sharp and immediate. Frank's loyalty was a tangible thing, a steel beam in a collapsing structure. That's not just theft, Art. That's a declaration of war. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Clara doesn't suspect a thing. This will destroy her world." "Evidence is evidence," Frank said, his voice hard. "You can't ignore this just to preserve her feelings. The man is a viper. You took him into your home, and this is how he repays you. You have to protect yourself." He was right. Frank's words cut through the fog of my emotional turmoil and clarified the path forward. Protecting Clara didn't mean shielding her from the truth. It meant removing the source of the poison. After hanging up, I sat in my recliner for a long time. The frozen image from the video burned into my mind. A police report would be the logical, official route. But that would shatter Clara's life in a way that might be irreparable. No, Rick didn't deserve the clean, impersonal justice of the legal system. He deserved a lesson, a personal, memorable, and meticulously engineered lesson. Prankster's Paradise blazed in neon letters above a storefront that looked like a carnival had exploded onto the street. I checked the address twice, feeling absurdly out of place among the colorful displays of whoopee cushions and fake spiders. But this wasn't about humor. This was about justice. A young clerk with purple hair approached, their expression a mixture of curiosity and boredom. "Looking for anything specific, sir?" "I'm looking for something that delivers a consequence for unwanted behavior," I said, my tone serious. "Harmless, but memorable." They led me to a glass case filled with various electrical novelties. "These shock items are pretty popular. What kind of application did you have in mind?" My eyes landed on a shocking wallet, its real leather exterior indistinguishable from an ordinary billfold. This one. How strong is the electrical charge? Completely safe, just 9 volts, enough to surprise someone without causing any real harm. I tested it on my own palm. A sharp, unpleasant zap. Perfect. I'll take it. And I need some realistic counterfeit money. Movie quality. Her eyebrows raised slightly. But she led me to another section filled with prop currency. The fake hundreds and twenties were impressive, the paper quality and printing precision nearly identical to the real thing. I bought $300 worth, a poetic replacement for the real money Rick had stolen. As the clerk packaged my purchases, they offered a wry smile. Hope this works out for whatever you're planning. Oh, I said, picking up the bag. It will work perfectly. Back in the quiet solitude of my garage, I carefully unpacked my purchases. The shock wallet felt solid in my hand, a well-made device designed for a single, specific purpose. I laid out the counterfeit bills on my workbench. Under the stark fluorescent light, they looked remarkably real. An engineer appreciates elegant design, whether in a bridge schematic or a plan for justice. This was my design, the final phase. I waited until evening, after the rhythms of the house had settled into their nightly routine. Clara was in the living room, watching one of her television shows. Rick was upstairs, supposedly reading, though more likely scrolling through his phone. I slipped into my bedroom. The real wallet, with my few remaining dollars and personal cards, went into the locked drawer of my old steel filing cabinet. Then, I took the shock wallet and carefully loaded it with the fake currency, arranging the bills to look natural, slightly worn, just as a real wallet would be. I placed it on the nightstand, in the exact spot my own wallet had occupied for decades. The stage was set. The actors were in place. All that was left was for the curtain to rise on the final act. Clara had made a beef stew, the rich aroma filling the kitchen with a sense of domestic warmth that felt like a lie. She ladled it into our bowls with the careful attention she always gave to family dinners, a desperate attempt to create harmony in a house that was quietly at war. "This looks wonderful, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice deliberately pleasant as I studied Rick across the table. He was unusually quiet, picking at his food instead of devouring it with his typical enthusiasm. The weight of his deception was making him careless. "Dad, you were working on something in the garage all afternoon," Clara said, trying to make conversation. "New project?" "Just organizing some old tools," I replied, buttering my bread with deliberate slowness. It's amazing what you find when you really start examining things closely. Rick's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Something in my tone had put him on alert. "Speaking of examining things," I continued, "I've been thinking about home security lately. It's fascinating how modern technology lets you monitor everything that happens in your own house, even when you're sleeping." "Security?" Clara looked up, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you worried about break-ins?" "Not break-ins exactly," I said, my eyes fixed on Rick. "More like internal security issues. Seems some people think other people's property is community property." He set down his fork entirely. "There you go again with your paranoia, Arthur. Maybe you just forget where you spend your money, and then blame other people." "Paranoia?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's an interesting theory, Rick. Tell me, how much did that warehouse overtime really pay you a few weeks ago? I'm just curious about wage rates these days." His jaw tightened. "Why does that matter to you?" "Because it seems like some people earn money very easily for very little actual work." Clara sensed the rising hostility. "Can't we just have one peaceful meal? You two have been so tense with each other. Your father's been making accusations he can't prove." Rick snapped, his facade of the respectful son-in-law finally cracking completely. "I'm tired of listening to complaints from a cheap old man who counts every penny like it's his last." The insult hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Clara's spoon clattered against her bowl. "A cheap old man," I repeated softly, leaning back in my chair. "That's a fascinating choice of words from someone living rent-free in my house, eating my food and enjoying the shelter I provide." He pushed back from the table abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." "No," I agreed calmly as he stormed upstairs. "You don't. This is my house, after all." The red digits on my bedside clock glowed. 1:50, 7 ampere. M. I heard the first soft footstep in the hallway, a sound so faint it would be lost to anyone truly asleep. I controlled my breathing, keeping it slow and deep, the steady rhythm of a man lost in slumber, while my heart hammered against my ribs with anticipation. 3 months of theft, disrespect, and humiliation were about to meet their consequence. The shock wallet sat innocently on my nightstand, a silent sentinel waiting to perform its duty. Every detail had been planned. The bait was in place. Another footstep, closer now. My bedroom door opened with the barest whisper of hinges. He had practiced this routine enough to avoid every creaking floorboard. He moved like a shadow, a professional burglar in the home that had given him shelter. I kept my eyes closed, but I tracked his approach through the subtle shift in the air, the soft sounds of his careful steps on the old carpet. 3 steps toward the dresser, a pause to verify my apparent unconsciousness. 2 more steps to the nightstand. His shadow fell across my bed. I could almost feel the heat of his presence, the greedy focus of his intent. The moment of truth arrived with electrical precision. Arg, what the? A strangled, agonized shout shattered the night's silence, followed by the clatter of the wallet hitting the floor. The sharp zap of 9 volts of justice had shot through his nervous system. The fake money scattered across the rug like fallen leaves as he stumbled backward, clutching his shocked hand against his chest. It was time. I opened my eyes and reached for the bedside lamp, flooding the room with warm yellow light. "Oh my," I said, my voice thick with perfectly feigned confusion. "What on earth woke me up? Rick, what in God's name are you doing in my bedroom at 2 a.m? He stood frozen beside my bed, the movie prop bills scattered around his feet like damning evidence in a courtroom. His right hand still trembled from the electrical shock, his fingers opening and closing reflexively. His face, caught in the sudden light, was a mask of pain, confusion, and dawning horror. I was just getting some water from the kitchen," he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, unable to meet mine. "Water?" I sat up slowly, making a show of adjusting my pajamas. "That's a long detour for a glass of water, isn't it? And how did my wallet end up on the floor, along with all those bills?" "Fake bills?" he parroted, his voice cracking. I don't understand what you're talking about." My voice dropped, losing all pretense of confusion, and taking on the cold, hard edge of steel. "The same way you didn't understand the previous times you stole from me. The same way you didn't understand when you spit in my drinking water." His face went completely white. "You're crazy. I never took anything from you." "Really?" I reached for my smartphone on the nightstand, my thumb hovering over the saved video file. "Should we review the security footage together? I have excellent recordings of all your late-night activities, Rick." The trapped animal look in his eyes told me everything. He was caught, but our private confrontation was about to become a family crisis. "What's all that noise?" Helen's voice called from the hallway, sleepy and concerned. "Is everything okay up there?" Clara appeared in the doorway, a silhouette against the dim hallway light. She was wearing her blue terry-cloth robe, her hair disheveled from sleep, her face a canvas of confusion. Her eyes took in the bizarre scene. Me, wide awake and sitting up in bed, holding my phone like a piece of evidence, the scattered fake money littering the carpet, and her husband, Rick, standing pale and guilty, clutching his hand as if it were burned. "What's happening here?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Why is everyone awake? Rick, why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I kept my own voice quiet, letting the facts speak for themselves. "Your husband has been stealing my money for months, Clara. I just caught him in the act." "Dad, that's impossible," she said instantly, the automatic defense of a loving wife springing to her lips. "Rick would never do something like that. You must be mistaken. You've been forgetting things." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply held out my phone, the screen still glowing with the paused video. "Watch this, and then tell me what you see." She shook her head at first, a gesture of denial, but the cold certainty in my eyes made her step closer. She took the phone from my hand. I watched her face, illuminated by the ghostly infrared light from the screen. I saw the progression of emotions as clearly as if they were written in an engineering schematic. First, confusion as the silent black and white footage began. Then, a flicker of recognition as she saw her own bedroom door open. Then, a sharp intake of breath as Rick's face came into perfect view. She watched him move to the nightstand, watched his hands take the money from the wallet. "This can't be real," she whispered, but her voice already carried the tremor of dawning horror. The video continued, relentlessly. She saw him count the bills, and then she saw the moment that transcended simple theft. She saw her husband, the man she loved and defended, pick up my water glass. She let out a small, choked gasp as he deliberately, hatefully, spit into it. The phone almost slipped from her fingers. "Rick?" She turned to face him, her eyes wide with a pain so deep it seemed to shatter her from the inside. Is that really you? You spit in my father's drinking water." "It's a setup." Rick's voice rose, shrill with desperation. "He's trying to frame me, Clara. You can't trust that footage. He's an engineer. He could have edited it somehow." But his lies were useless now, undone by the raw, undeniable truth on the screen. "But I can see your face so clearly." Clara's voice grew smaller with each observation, each word a nail in the coffin of her marriage. "That's our bedroom door in the background. That's the exact shirt you wore yesterday. How could he edit something so specific?" She looked from the phone to her husband, her world collapsing in real time. The gold chain he had given her, purchased with my stolen money, suddenly seemed to burn against her skin. The gratitude she'd felt, the love, the trust, all of it was dissolving into a sickening pool of lies. 3 months of deception were being undone in 3 minutes of video. Finally, she raised her head, and when she looked at her husband, her eyes held no love, only a vast empty landscape of betrayal and disgust. She sank onto the edge of my bed, her hands covering her face, and for a moment the only sound in the room was her quiet, heartbroken sobbing. Then the sobbing stopped. She stood up, her movements stiff, and looked at the man she had married. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper, but it carried the finality of a judge's sentence. "Pack your things." Rick started to protest, his voice a pathetic whine, but the look on Clara's face stopped him cold. The woman he thought he had manipulated, the wife he had taken for granted, was gone. In her place was a stranger with eyes as hard and cold as Pittsburgh steel. The damage was irreversible. Justice, in the form of a heartbroken daughter, had finally arrived. By the next afternoon, the sound of cardboard boxes being taped shut had replaced the morning's tense silence. Clara folded her clothes with a mechanical precision, each movement careful and dignified, despite the tears that occasionally fell onto the sweaters and blouses she placed in a suitcase. In contrast, Rick threw his belongings carelessly into boxes, slamming drawers and muttering under his breath about unfairness and betrayal, the irony apparently lost on him. I stayed nearby, sitting in my recliner in the living room, but I didn't pressure her with conversation. I simply made coffee and kept a quiet vigil. Sometimes the best support a father can offer is to simply be present while his daughter's world is dismantled and rebuilt. "Dad, I owe you an apology," she said quietly, her back still to me as she wrapped her good dishes in newspaper. "You have nothing to apologize for, Clara." "Yes, I do," she insisted, turning to face me, her eyes red, rimmed but clear. "I should have seen what was happening. I should have questioned where that money was coming from. I defended him. I doubted you. You're not at fault, honey," I said, my voice gentle. "You trusted him. That's what you do in a marriage. That's not a weakness. That's how good people are supposed to live." She paused in her packing, looking around the small room that had been her temporary home. "I don't know where we'll go. I just know we can't stay here. You have your job. You're strong. You'll figure it out," I said, handing her another sheet of newspaper. "And you'll always be welcome back here. Whenever you're ready. This is your home, too." Outside, Rick loaded the last box into his truck with aggressive, resentful movements. Neighbors pretended not to watch from their windows, but I could feel their curiosity from across the street. As Clara carried her final suitcase to the driveway, she stopped beside me on the front steps. "I hate that it came to this," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "But I'm glad you showed me the truth. Living with those lies, that would have been worse." I'm proud of you for having the courage to face it. She hugged me tightly then, the kind of embrace that said goodbye and thank you and I love you all at once. I'll call you when we're settled. I just... I need some time. Rick slammed the truck's tailgate shut and glared at me, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. You'll regret destroying this family, old man. I looked back at him, my gaze even and steady. I didn't destroy it, Rick. I just turned on the lights. I then looked past him to my daughter, who was about to climb into the passenger seat. Just drive carefully and take care of my daughter. That's all that matters now. The truck's engine rumbled to life, its diesel exhaust clouding the crisp April air. I stood on my porch and watched them disappear down the street, my daughter's profile visible through the side window, sad but resolute. The house felt different the moment I stepped back inside. Quieter, more spacious. It felt like mine again. I walked through the living room, past the now empty coat rack by the door where Rick's jacket used to hang. I went into the kitchen and made a single cup of coffee in my old percolator, not the family-sized pot I'd grown accustomed to. The simple, solitary ritual felt like a homecoming. I settled into my worn recliner with the evening paper, the house silent, save for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. A sound I hadn't truly noticed in months. Outside, the spring darkness settled peacefully over the neighborhood. There would be no more missing money, no more thinly veiled insults at the dinner table, no more walking on eggshells in my own home. My daughter was hurting, and my heart ached for her, but the poison had been removed. What I had done wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of protection. It was the only way to restore the integrity of the home my Eleanor and I had built. The engineering approach had worked. Identify the problem, analyze the data, design a solution, implement the fix, and now, verify the results. The result was this: a quiet, profound peace. My home was secure again. The problem had been solved. Trust is a delicate structure, built over years of shared moments and mutual respect. It is reinforced by honesty and strengthened by loyalty, but it is also incredibly fragile. It can be eroded slowly by the constant drip of disrespect, or shattered in an instant by a single act of betrayal. And when that structure is compromised, when its foundations are threatened by deception, sometimes the most loving act is not to patch the cracks, but to tear down what is broken. It is a painful, difficult process, one that requires a courage many do not possess. But only by facing the hardest truths can we hope to rebuild on solid ground, creating a space where dignity can flourish once more, in the quiet peace that follows the storm. Thank you for joining us on this difficult but powerful journey. Every family has its own challenges, and the choices we make in those moments define who we are. What did you think of the final decision? Was it justice, or was it too harsh? We would love to read your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. If this story moved you or made you think, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more tales that explore the complexities of the human heart. Your support helps us continue to bring these stories to you. Thank you for watching.